Real quickly, I wanted to show a comparison between the two, or the results of the two polls that we sent out. So again, this is the first one, and it seems that we had 6 very popular responses, which was critical, distrust, close, information, interactive, and media. We kind of went over that one, and I would like to show the results of the second poll. Now, there were less responses because of the time constraints, but we can see that there were 2 popular answers this time, and they were critical and explore. So I think it's very interesting that critical came up twice, but I think with the change in the question, I wonder if the meaning of critical and the connotation of being critical towards media has changed from doubt to simply questioning from what you're given at face value, as this shows up, or this term shows up alongside explore. So I just wanted to touch on that, and thank you guys so much again.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Christine, for sharing. So now we are going to move into the third and final section of today's symposium. Today we will be having the Environment and Development Roundtable and the Labor and Work Culture Roundtable. After that, we'll be hearing some closing remarks from the chair of the American Executive Committee, so please stick around for that. And I think we are good to start.
Good morning, fellow delegates and alumni. Today, Environment and Development RT would like to present to you about what we have done so far. I'm I, and I will give a brief overview of our RT discussions and activities. Rika will talk about the water crisis, and Takuya and Gio about imbalance between environment, economics, and human life. Ryu and Victoria will speak to you about sustainability. Last but not least, he or she will conclude our presentation. In Japadeli RT time, we have decided to focus on the environment in May and economics in June, so that we're on the same page and have basic understanding of the subject. In regards to the environmental issues, we have discussed agricultural modernization, electrification, recycling water bottles, and food waste. As for economics, we have included the dilemma in the tobacco industry, population issues, and economic disparity. In August, we have incorporated debates considering both environment and economic aspects of the issues. We also had online field trips to listen to the experts and have deeper understanding of the matters, which includes JICA and Ministry of Environment. In order for us to gain not only deep understanding but also broad knowledge and avoid our biases in the discussion, we had joint RT meetings. In addition to that, we had discussions about environment and a certain major or program of educational institutions, which was randomly picked and discussed how that relates and influences each other. The majors include psychology, linguistics, religion, and geography. In Amedeli side, they have discussed about Green New Deal, deforestation, rising sea levels, microplastics, and clean energy. In addition to that, they also had discussion about whether carbon dioxide is evil or not, credibility of renewable energy, and so on. In joint RT meetings within environmental RT, we had talked about food loss and waste, Paris Agreement, and definitions of developed and developing countries.
Hi, I'm Rika, and I would like to explain our first topic for the main conference, that is water crisis. In our roundtable, we define the water crisis to be first, having few access to fresh water which is necessary to maintain a certain level of our lives, and second, discharging polluted water with waste and chemicals from agriculture and industrial districts, and poisoning river and ocean. In many cases, the water crisis is triggered due to population growth, climate change, food production, power generation, and so on. When it comes to water pollution, the main causes are drainage of toxic chemicals from factory and runoff of fertilizer and pesticides, which are harmful for the human body and the environment. Since water pollution is the issue both Japan and the United States have in common, we decided to have a discussion on this matter. For the discussion, we set two questions. First, who should take responsibility for water pollution? And the second, what approaches the United States and Japan have taken. For the first question, many of us believe that manufacturing companies, consumers, and the government of each country are responsible, and the cooperation of company and the government could lead us to a solution. Some of us also mentioned that consumers have directly induced water pollution by using plastic products such as plastic bottles, and some of them dumped it into the river and ocean as if nature can digest and remove it permanently. To deal with this issue, what we could do is to choose alternatives to plastic bottles, including ones made of glass. Though it is hard to recycle them properly and to carry since glass is heavier than plastics. Lastly, for the second question, we mainly talked from the perspectives of consumers and the companies. We've also found there's a way to prevent used oil from draining by bringing it to collection points in some parts of the United States. Yet, for manufacturing companies, it seems hard to work on the water pollution even when they have done researches because they prioritize the profit.
Our second topic is the causes of imbalance among human life, environment, and economy. Our first question is, do you think there is an imbalance among human life, environment, and economy? Most of us thought there is an imbalance among these, and there are mainly two opinions. At first, we want to develop the economy by using resources such as fossil fuel, but resources are limited. Second, when we talk about the imbalance, we are usually prioritizing economic development. It means we are not focused enough on environmental issues. That's why the general population can't focus on environmental issues. That might cause damage related to imbalance among these. Our next question is, do you think we should fix the cause of imbalance in the first place? We believe that imbalance is a necessary evil, and at the same time, we believe it needs to be fixed in some way. The reason why we believe that imbalance is a necessary evil is that it is impossible to protect 100% of the environment through economic development, and that development will ultimately lead to environmental protection. The reason why we need to fix the imbalance to a certain extent is that developed countries such as Japan and the United States have a more stable life than developing countries, so they can shift to environmental protection. If developing countries aim for economic growth, while developed countries focus on environmental protection, the imbalance between the environment, economic development, and human life in the world as a whole can be corrected.
Moreover, we discussed the extent that one could downgrade their lifestyle as a result of prioritizing environmental protection. Most of the delegates mentioned that they would accept the downgrade in order to protect the environment. Furthermore, there were delegates that argued that pursuing economic growth and protecting the environment is compatible through the advancement in technology and peer pressure from other nations. However, there were delegates that said that it was impossible for them to downgrade their lifestyle in the first place. They pointed out that whether renewable energy could displace fossil fuel is questionable, and the difficulty to do so would make it hard for individuals to maintain their current lifestyle. Moving on, the purpose of this part of the discussion was to challenge our pre-existing ideas and to come up with alternative explanations about the negative effects of the overemphasis on environmental protection or economic growth. One delegate mentioned that there is a concern that overemphasis towards environmental protection would heighten tension in the realm of international politics. He feared that forcing nations to pursue environmental protection equally would decrease the will of nations to be committed in foreign affairs due to the constraints caused by environmental regulations, causing a destabilization in the world order.
What is a sustainable society? Well, the general consensus in our discussions of the goal of sustainability is what is needed for humans to live on Earth permanently. There are many aspects to the phrase a sustainable society, and those aspects include economics, society, and environment. In an environmental point of view, a sustainable society is when closed system can occur with zero net waste. An example of this can be the carbon cycle. Right now, we are not sustainable regarding a carbon cycle because our output of carbon is in excess compared to the intake, resulting in carbon dioxide waste. In the economic aspect, a sustainable society is reached when corporations and countries can rely on current resources. Our example for the economic aspect is how different nations receive their energy. In many countries, fossil fuel is imported, and thus these nations must rely on other nations for their supply of energy. Thus, this weakens their national security and makes the nation's economy unsustainable. In terms of society, a sustainable society would be reached when individuals in the population are equitable and overall happiness of the population is tolerable.
I'm going to talk about the factors of sustainable society. There are three main factors that will contribute to the sustainable society downgrading your lifestyle, increasing satisfaction mentally using renewable energy. The first factor is downgrading your lifestyle. As the economic growth, our lifestyle became better and better. However, there are some opinions that our lifestyle is too good for ourselves. Using trains instead of using cars, spending not so much on fashion are some of the concrete plans to accomplish downgrading our lifestyle, although they are radical plans to some extent. In fact, there are some people who need cars to commute or whose hobby is enjoying fashion. The second factor is increasing our satisfaction mentally. If we downgrade our life, we might feel regretful to give up our convenience and pleasure of today's lifestyle. But if we can increase our satisfaction mentally, we might decrease the regret. For example, increasing our health can contribute to increase our satisfaction mentally. In these days, lots of people are suffering from diseases. Nevertheless, we can eat as much as we want, almost anything we want. Therefore, if we can improve our health, people won't eat too much and stop the food loss. However, if we could do that, the problem will not exist. The third factor is spreading renewable energy. If we can generate electricity without the emission of carbon dioxide, we can realize the sustainable society. However, there are some problems like the construction of hydroelectric power stations affects the fishes which cannot move as they want because of this obstacle of the plants. To conclude, there are many factors to realize sustainable society. However, what we found from the discussion is that we need to know what is a disturbance making the factors not working so that we can eliminate them.
As a conclusion part, I would like to reflect on our discussion during the summer conference. Before the conference, we set the 3 discussion topics and plan to exchange, break, and reconstruct our values. For that, we focused on 3 topics and tried to challenge others' values thoroughly. In the summer conference, all delegates joined the discussion more proactively than before, and we got to know many opinions and aspects. For example, some people think imbalance should be fixed urgently, and the others don't think so because it is a tentative problem and will be solved gradually. Those different opinions reflected their thoughts and values, and it was interesting to think about the gaps. Also, we were able to challenge others' values by asking questions or stating objective opinions intentionally. However, we couldn't deepen the topics enough in the limited time. To use time more effectively, we should have shared opinions before the RT meeting, but that was a little hard considering time zone differences. Also, though many opinions and ideas were shared, we couldn't make a clear conclusion by taking account into them. Based on this reflection, we need to clarify our values more and make efforts to achieve our goals until the winter conference.
Thank you very much, Environment RT. This brings us to our question and answer section, and our first question will be from Katsuta Pennington, please.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the very informational presentation. You mentioned about economic development, And I just wondered, even in economically developed countries like the United States and Japan, there are still devastating effects on individuals from pollutions, as we learned in the panel by Dr. Shizuka about crisis and vulnerable populations. So my question is, what do you believe is necessary to ensure environmental protection, not just in a macro level, but on a micro level?
Okay, thank you for your question. I'd like to answer your question on water so pollution, right? So on a micro level, in a discussion, we found like so it's kind of it sounds like optimistic, but like we found like implementing law by the government for the resident in like developed country to recycle like used oil or any like kind of the waste, liquid type of waste in a proper way would be one solution.
Thank you so much.
Any further questions, please either raise your hand or message me privately in the Zoom chat. Risako, you have your hand raised.
As I have interest in how clothing industry approaches to solving environmental issues, I was wondering if you guys discussed any specific solutions, how the fashion industry could solve this issue regarding greenwashing and other problems that accompany solving the issues.
I will answer that. We discussed mainly about downgrading our lifestyle. So as a factors of how to accomplish sustainable society. So we didn't focus on what the clothes industry was doing to improve to realize the sustainable society. So we'd like to discuss after this summer session. Thank you for your opinion.
I will note that any questions that we do not get through in this Q&A session, Rika has now posted in the Zoom chat the Google form. As with every other RT, if you have questions, you're welcome to fill it out there as well. If there are no further questions at this time, we will move on to our final RT. Thank you guys so much.
Okay, we are the Labor and Work Culture RT, and we're going to start our presentation through the lens of COVID-19. Next slide, please. Our presentation starts from introducing general issues of work culture before COVID-19, including parental leave, gender inequalities, and the inequalities between non-regular workers and regular workers, etc. Afterwards, we will explain how these situations either showed up, changed, or were strengthened by COVID. As a wrap-up, we will suggest how the workplace would look like in the post-COVID era. First, we would like to start off with explaining some differences of work culture between the US and Japan. As listed on the table on the slide, we came to discuss the differences, such as how the US focused on individuals, while Japan respects the peace of the group. how US companies tend to adopt the merit system, while Japanese companies adopt the seniority system, offering higher positions within the firm or higher wages to the elderly rather than for young workers. The existence of nomikais, which are after-work drinking parties with the workers, was viewed as a symbol of how close the workplace is to your private life. We also shared a view of how the generosity towards the introduction of gig work, which refers to a new work style for workers to utilize their free time to get work from contractors without belonging into a certain organization, differs between US and Japan as well. While it is said that 34% of the workforce in the US refers to gig work, in Japan only 17% does. As a whole, Japanese companies tend to share a trait of thinking themselves to be a life-supporting organ in a sense for the workers. They provide opportunities for the young to develop their skills, regardless of whether or not they are talented at first, and benefit those who show loyalty towards the company culture. Therefore, old customs which were developed by senior workers tend to last longer, such as hankos, and this has caused a controversy in terms of the adaptation to labor in the coronavirus era. On the other hand, companies in the US have a character of being a kind of platform for workers to express their talent, where people who have better abilities get more chances and reward rather than based on simply how long they have been working.
I would like to talk about telework trends. In the United States, telework was introduced since the 1970s, and after the 2000s, as the development of communication in digital technology, telework has been actively adopted in the American society. The teleworking adoption rate of enterprises is highest in the world at 85%, and the teleworking population is about 20% of all employees. However, as a trend before the pandemic, some major companies such as Yahoo, Best Buy, IBM, etc. has limited or restricted telework because teleworking does not seem to deliver maximum performance in marketing departments that require creative collaboration in teams. After the pandemic, telework gets attention as part of measures, especially among the major tech companies. More flexible ways of working are being reviewed. In Japan, on the other hand, telework has introduced in the 1980s with reference to American telework. After the bursting of the bubble economy, the efforts for telework have decreased, but as the use of computers became more common in the early 2000s, it began to receive attention again. As Japan's working population declined, the government sought to promote telework in order to popularize various forms of labor participation, and the use rate has doubled in the 5 years before the corona pandemic. The adoption of telework has rapidly progressed due to the corona pandemic. It has risen to about 40% as of April 2020. However, the percentage has dropped to around 35% since the decline of emergency was cancelled. The trend toward decrease is likely to strong, so future trends are noteworthy.
Next, I would like to talk about parental leave. First, it's about Japan. Maternity leave can be taken from 6 weeks before giving birth until 8 weeks after the birth. About child care leave, mothers can take a year and paid at 67% of the regular salary for 6 months and then 50% after that. Let's move on to the United States. In fact, the US is the only industrialized nation that doesn't guarantee paid parental leave through federal law. The Family and Medical Leave Act mandates workers get 12 weeks unpaid parental leave. However, many had returned to work sooner than 12 weeks because they needed money or feared losing their jobs. Surprising to notice that President Trump signed a Federal Employee Paid Leave Act this year, which grants federal employees up to 12 weeks of paid time off. This graph shows the period of parental leave. In Japan, male employees can take 1 year of paid leave. However, despite the general system, only 7% of fathers in Japan took parental leave last year. The fact of the could be staff shortages, employers not offering it, and unfavorable atmosphere. Next, please. I will move on inequality brought by parent leave. So in Japan, we clearly see the inequality between non-regular workers and regular workers. Around 300,000 workers could take parental leaves in 2015. However, only 3.5% of non-regular workers could take parental leave. Additionally, more than half of non-regular workers were women. In America, 40% of employers said they now offer paid parental leave. However, America does not have governmental support system. Therefore, whether workers can get paid parental leave is up to their workplaces. And most cases, the time is not enough. In short, it seems the gap between the rich and poor and among races even gets bigger. Next, please.
An outdated working culture of gender expectations still exists to this day. Both in the US and Japan, women feel like they aren't trusted enough to take crucial roles that define their company's businesses. 42% of American working women have reported that they have experienced some type of discrimination based on their gender at work. 16% of women are regularly assigned repeated small slights at work. Similarly, in Japan, about a quarter of women employees feel they are assigned unimportant and repetitive tasks. This trend or expectation still exists because the stereotype of women being nurturing and supporting creates an expectation of them to support male workers behind the scenes. The exceeding numbers of female participation in household responsibilities creates this false imagery of them voluntarily supporting men. Next slide, please. Oftentimes, women have been enforced upon values too often that they naturally conform to expectations. The reason why this issue persists for so long can be credited to that, as the minority group simply follows the lead of the majority. Whistleblowing on authoritative figures is an important action to take and should continue, but we shouldn't be too obsessed with identifying the who, spending all our attention towards that. Rather, what is important is to address the next steps we can take to fix the issue, whether it is hosting workshops, restructuring departments, etc. Next slide, please. A near 40% of Japanese working women feel confident that housework responsibilities can be balanced with their work responsibilities. The freedom allotted between business meetings have allowed many women to utilize the extra time for housework. In addition, male participation of housework has also increased slightly due to the shift of work environment. But in a post-COVID workplace, there's also 20% of women who are heavily concerned about their ability to sustain their job responsibilities and housework. This can be credited to two reasons. First being some companies have resisted transferring to a work from home structure, especially seen in Japanese companies due to their reliance on in-person communication. The second being employers aren't understanding of having to sustain housework, as they assume the extra time that used to be commuting can now all be allocated to work purposes. Although COVID has provided a safe environment for many working women, the extent to which it was able to restructure gender norms as a whole is still questionable. Next slide, please.
Now I'm going to talk about the relationships between working from home and our mental health. Well, first, please imagine what it would be like to work from home. Your office chair is your couch, your commute is the length of your hallway. Don't you think it's amazing? Well, there are, of course, lots of pros and cons of working from home, but now let's look at the positives first. Well, one of the hardest things about working in the office is that it prevents you from being able to handle almost anything else that comes up in your life, whether having a dentist appointment or picking up your kid from school. But when you work from home, there will be greater flexibility, and this sounds like an ideal working style. However, the reality is that several data show that the possibilities that you will feel stressed will be higher when you work from home. According to the survey, which was conducted last June in the United States, more than 50% of those who are working from home during this pandemic found themselves more stressed compared to when they were working in the office. But then, what is it that is creating this situation? Well, there are considered to be several reasons for this. Well, first, always-on culture. Even before the pandemic, it was quite common to be always on, making sure that we did not miss work calls and messages. And some respondents of the survey even claim that they are required to work anytime, even on weekends and public holidays, since the line between their professional and personal lives has blurred. Well, second, feeling of isolation. Well, you might not realize it until you're not there, but there is a lot of casual collaboration that happens in the office, whether it's a brainstorming session over lunch or just a casual conversation like what they are planning to do on weekends. And this lack of communications among coworkers can create a situation that your coworkers might accuse you of slacking. Well, when you work from home and can get to a call or email right away, your coworkers and your bosses may not be as forgiving as they might be in the office. Well, people might wonder if you're taking it easy rather than pulling your weight, which is so stressful for me, just imagine that. Well, what we have to keep in mind is that when we don't automatically run across people outside of those we live with, we can become lonely before we realize it. Well, if you feel isolated or frustrated with yourself, please make sure to share your feelings with others. And it's also important for both employers and employees to remember that working from home during a pandemic is vastly different than usual and can cause a lot of pressure and stress for some people.
I will be talking about the effect of COVID-19 had on an unfortunate unemployment rate in America and Japan. For America, I will be comparing the effect of unemployment between people of color and white people. For unemployment in America, it is at a 10.2% as of July. If you can see the orange and blue graph, you will see that the unemployment in May of 2020 was higher for people of color after COVID-19 hit. There is a higher risk of POC to get infected due to the lack of health insurance, occupations, less social distancing, and underlying conditions. Asian Americans are 1.3 times more likely to get affected compared to whites. Black and brown communities have been disproportionately affected by COVID-19 also. There are many workers of color that are holding essential jobs due to the shutdown. They had to resort to unemployment. Moving on to Japan and the difference of unemployment between foreigners and Japanese. In the Mie prefecture, it was more likely to let go foreigner workers. Some of the reasons this can be is because of the weaker support network, language barriers, and foreign workers usually do not turn to the government for help. Although there are not an explosion in unemployment during the pandemic, it still reached a 2.9% for unemployment.
So what does life in a post-COVID-19 world look like? Let's find out. The US can expect healthcare to be a very important and highlighted topic in politics, and even more so at the center of elections as a result of the pandemic. We predict a world of increased activism and demand for the government to step in and fix what is a systemic oppression problem in the country. In the US, 43% of Black and Latino workers are employed in service or production jobs that is for the most part that cannot be done remotely, and they make up most of our essential workforce, such as grocery store workers and factory workers. Only about 1 in 4 white workers held such jobs. Latinx people between the ages of 40 and 59 have been infected at 5 times the rate of white people in the same age group. In terms of Japan, we predict a shift in family relationships and work culture. Although 63% of businesses project pessimistic outcomes for their companies, many are finding new ways to work remotely despite the Japanese culture of working with others in person and engaging in drinking parties with coworkers. It is critical for Japan's economy to digitize, and it has become very important as the country's low birth rates and rising life expectancy have reduced the domestic workforce, those aged 15 to 64 years old, to only 59.7% of the total population. Even with more efforts to hire women and foreign workers, this demographic change threatens to stall GDP growth for the next decade, but there is potential. Household responsibilities are also being more distributed equally amongst husbands and wives, and many fathers are participating more in raising their children.
The rest of the world will change in terms of travel. As a vaccine is hopefully developed soon, it may be a requirement for passengers to enter into countries. For example, an immunity passport indicates a form of documentation given to those who have recovered from COVID. The idea will likely be explored and implemented further to promote normalcy. Healthcare workers are experiencing burnout from working long hours, and this trend is expected to continue worldwide. Overall, the world will adapt to new habits. Delivery workers are expected to increase in demand as more people stay home and have things delivered to them. Technological advancements and knowledge will need to be more accessible. We hope that people will be able to make the best of their home and work environments during these times of social distancing.
Thank you all for listening. Yume has posted the Google form for their, if you have any questions that we do not get to during the Q&A session, in the chat. Mr. John Shalowitz, you have a question.
Oh, great, thanks. Well, great presentation. All the presentations have been great, but especially this one. I think you guys had the unfortunate advantage of having a very timely topic to talk about with COVID-19, and you did a really good job of capturing many of the issues. So my question is around the fact that we've made great progress on the tech side to help people communicating in telework. So we have Zoom, we have Slack, et cetera. But on the performance side, how we track performance, individual performance and contribution in many ways still lags. So was this a topic that you all discussed? Did you talk about the need maybe to have better tracking tools or better ways to track, certainly during COVID or even post-COVID?
So I think Michael talked about this the most in terms of, so it's really hard to track performance when people are working remotely, especially because things like motivation levels are also affected by people being inside in their homes for so long. Apologies. And so it wasn't something that we really heavily focused on, but it was brought up. And I think that's something that is gonna be projected to get better. At least in the United States, people are more open to like shifting remotely, like completely. But in Japan, you know, they still value that like closeness, that close contact in person type of work. So even though most businesses are not very optimistic about the future of remote working and tracking performance, many are starting to accept that that's the reality of it. So although we didn't focus too much in on that, I can imagine that both countries are on completely different levels of like progression in that, in being able to track workers. I hope that helped.
Thank you.
Yo Sakiyama, you have a question.
Yeah, so thank you for your wonderful presentation. So I think so as the system became more efficient, so did humans. The movement is more promoted after COVID-19. I feel that society, especially in a creative society, is working to eliminate inefficient humans. So where did you think the people who are neither honest nor respectable exist in company? Isn't there a place for such a person? Thank you.
Sorry, I think like I couldn't understand like 100%, but your question is like are there like respectful in the company?
Yeah, so okay, so I sent in chat for my question.
Thank you.
So where do you think the people who are neither honest nor respectable people exist in company? So I feel so society tends to eliminate inefficient humans.
In my opinion, like from my understanding, I think people have disrespect on the company system and human, like individual human as well. So I think we need to like reduce both of them. Like each of us, we have like biased information about towards like politics or like gender, especially if we clearly see the gender inequalities. So like we need like in the first like individual level, we need to understand the like both is gender is important, and like we need to respect from like our like individual based, and also like the like kind of like soft power. So we need, and also like as a hard power, like company also need to support our like individual. So I think we have like both disrespectful from both sides. Yeah. Thank you for your question.
To add, I think so. Thank you very much for the question. I think you were like trying to kind of point out the fact that, especially like in Japan, there's this culture of respecting those who commit mostly in work, and so like there's people who, you know, the people who just don't kind of put pressure on work is kind of, you know, thought as unrespected. But what I want to say is that, so because of the pandemic, global pandemic, I think each one of us had the chance to kind of stay in the house, and so example for fathers, I think they had the chance to kind of see how the housework is going, how your wife is kind of taking care of the children, and how difficult that is if you actually try to do it. Oh, sorry for the time. So to wrap up, I just wanted to point out that, you know, there were some pros for this COVID-19 situation, especially for the people who were thought to be inefficient before the global pandemic.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry I had to kind of cut your comment short there, but unfortunately we do need to move on to our closing remarks from the chair of the American Executive Committee, Chris. Thank you all so much. Could we get real quick, actually, one round of applause for all of our RTs and their hard work. They've done an incredible job. Wonderful. And with that, I will pass to Chris. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madeline. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Christopher Weaver, and I have had the honor and privilege to be the American Executive Committee Chair for the 72nd Japan-America Student Conference. Thank you all for coming today to support our delegation as they continue on this great tradition that we call JASC. First, let me begin by saying just how proud I am of all of our delegates for their hard work, dedication, and commitment to this year's conference, despite the unpredictability this year has brought. The world we lived in back in the fall and winter when delegates were first applying to this program looked nothing like the world we're in today. Yet, despite the challenges and evolution our conference has gone through, our delegates took those changes in stride and in fact made a conference that I believe will be remembered for decades to come. I commend each of you for your part in making JASC 72 such a great experience, and I'm excited to see what the rest of the year has in store. Of course, this virtual portion of the conference would not have been possible without the support of our alumni network and partners, and I want to take a moment now to thank some of them. First, let me thank Mr. Paul Lee from the United States Institute of Peace, Hirohisa Kuwata, reporter at the Fukushima Minyu newspaper, Noboru Suzuki, head of Michinoeki Naraha in Fukushima Prefecture, Professor Okiyoshi Takeda from Aoyama Gakuin University, Dr. Shizuka Shea of Smith College, Mr. Justin Kawaguchi from the Okaeri organization, Gin Hidari from Human Rights Watch Japan, Professor Robert Jacobs of Hiroshima City University, and to Professor Roland Keltz of Waseda University. Without the help of these wonderful speakers, we could not have had such an outstanding lineup of programming for this year's JASC. Additionally, I want to thank some of our alumni, Mr. Jamie Miura, Mr. Stefan Fouché, and Ms. Jill Kunushima, for their contributions to this year's JASC programming and planning. And finally, none of this would have been possible without the support and direction of both ISC and IEC. Despite all of the challenges, no one believed in our ability to create this conference more than them. And on behalf of the executive committee, we cannot thank them enough. And while I think this year's virtual conference has been a resounding success, unlike in past JASCs, this year's delegation will have the opportunity to continue their JASC experience through the fall as we prepare for an in-person continuation of JASC 72 in Honolulu, Hawaii in January 2021. From now until January, each of this year's roundtable groups will continue to meet and discuss their RT topics as we prepare to gather together in Hawaii. During these meetings, each RT will have the unique opportunity to devise and execute a project relating to their roundtable topic, which they will be presenting to the delegation and to the world at the JASC 72 Final Forum. In doing so, this year's delegation will be able to leave a tangible impact on the US-Japan relationship in ways not possible before. Being the capable student leaders that they are, I can only imagine what kinds of fascinating projects these delegates will take on. This year's Final Forum will take place on Tuesday, January 5th, and we plan to live stream the presentations on Facebook or YouTube so that our alumni and partners around the world can see what the delegation of JASC 72 has accomplished. I implore you, if you are unable to join us in person, to please join us on our live stream. We will be sure to distribute the information for joining as we approach the in-person conference. Now, as I close, I want to thank you all again for coming today to support the delegation of the 72nd Japan-America Student Conference. It is through events like these that our program can maintain the incredible alumni network we have built over the last 86 years. Wherever you may be out there in the world, I wish you good health and happiness, and I hope to see you all again soon. Thank you.
Okay, so before closing, we would like to take a group picture real quick. And the pictures are very likely to be used in our social media posts. So if you wish not to be on those, it will be lovely if you could turn off the video for a second. And if that's done, I would proceed taking the photos. Okay, so in 3, 2, 1. Okay, good. We'll have to take the next one as well. In 3, 2, 1, cheese. Great. Thank you very much. So, pass it back to you, Madeline, I guess.
So, as Chris mentioned, this concludes our JASC Symposium. We thank you all so much for coming, and we hope that everyone has a wonderful day, night, afternoon, whatever place in the world that you may be.